Hey everyone, today we're going to be showing you how to replace your clutch on your Yamaha TW200. Now these things have been around forever. They're pretty bulletproof, but since they've been around so long, things do wear out. So with our bike, Chase, our rider, he's been noticing the clutch has been slipping, so we're ready to get in there and get it repaired. If you're not sure if you're to this point or not, one thing you can do is shift the bike into a high gear and grab the throttle. If it kind of bogs and takes a second for the engine RPM to come up, you know the clutch is not slipping. But if the engine RPM comes up right away and then it takes a second before it accelerates, the clutch is probably slipping. So you're going to want to check your clutch free play, things like that. But if all that's correct, you know you need to get in there. Another symptom you can look for is when you let the clutch out. If you hear a chirp, then that's another sign. So with all that said, let's go ahead and jump into this. For parts, we have the EBC clutch plate set. It's only going to come with the friction. It does not come with the steels, but most of the time in these, that's all you're going to be replacing. We also have the heavy duty clutch springs, and under the OEM diagram, I got this clutch covered gasket. Now, when you're changing the clutch out, you're going to want some fresh oil in there. So we have the Tusk 4-stroke oil change kit. Comes with your choice of oil, oil filter, all the O-rings, and a funnel. We've got some rubber gloves, a little bit of grease, and some contact cleaner. To get this done, you're going to need some common hand tools. I just want to point out we've got 8, 10, and 19 millimeter sockets. We've got 5 and 8 millimeter Allens, screwdrivers, a torque wrench. Now, things that are a little more specific to this job are going to be the digital calipers. We also have a gear jammer, a gasket scraper, and we're going to be using some Loctite. Now, in addition to all of this, it can be nice to have some impact drivers. We're also going to be using safety glasses. And then for the drain pans, I'm going to use 2. I'm going to use one for the old engine oil and then one to soak the new clutch plates in. The first thing we want to do is disconnect our battery because we don't want the engine cranking over while we're working on it. So underneath the seat, there's 2 bolts. We're going to remove both of those along with the seat. And I'm just going to disconnect the negative battery terminal. Now with the battery disconnected, if you have a skid plate on your bike, you want to go ahead and remove it. Next, we need to drain the oil, so I'm going to crack the oil cap loose, or you can remove it if you want. And then we'll remove our drain plug. And as you pull that off, pay attention to that O-ring, make sure it stays on there. And we've got a spring, and there's going to be a screen inside of here. We'll remove those. And while that's draining, I'm going to clean these other parts up. You can see we have a little bit of debris on the screen. Then we're going to remove that old O-ring. Get the new one, apply a little bit of oil on it, and set it onto the plug. Now on the other side, we need to remove this oil filter cover. And on this one, we've got a 5 millimeter Allen and then 2 8 millimeter head bolts. On some of the older bikes, these are going to be a number 3 JIS screw. And we can pull that oil filter out and pay attention to the orientation as you remove it. The open side is facing out. We'll give everything a wipe down in here. Get that dirty oil out. You can see we had a little bit of shavings in there. Then we can clean up our cover and reinstall the new oil filter and O-rings. Make sure you have a little bit of oil on the rubber parts. Then we can reinstall the cover and the bolts. Next, we need to get this brake pedal out of the way. So we've got a rod going up to the brake light switch. To remove it, you're going to pull down and out. And you're just releasing that little tiny hook at the bottom. So with that out of the way, we have 2 bolts holding this foot peg and brake pedal on. I'm gonna go ahead and remove those with my 8mm Allen. So we can let that foot peg swing down and out of the way. We're gonna pull that brake pedal off as well. And I'm also gonna release this rod from the brake light switch. Now we can remove the clutch cover. So when you do this, you just want to prevent it from being warped. So we're going to loosen up each of the bolts in a crisscross pattern, and we'll go just a quarter turn, and then we can remove them all. Now on this top bolt, we have a bracket that holds the wiring, so pay attention to that. And then on the older bikes, you have the larger JIS head screws all the way around. And to loosen those up, you're going to want to use an impact driver, and that's going to help prevent from stripping the screw heads out. On older models, you're going to need to remove your kickstart. From here, we can remove the clutch cover. You do have some pry tabs. You can use a pry bar to help remove the cover, but ours, we're going to be able to wiggle this and pull it off. There should be some dowel pins underneath here, so you're going to want to pay attention to those. Make sure you don't drop them in your oil bucket. Okay, the next step is to disassemble the clutch. So we have these 4 bolts holding the springs down, and we're just going to back them off evenly, a little bit at a time, so the pressure plate comes out evenly. And then as we pull these off, you just have the bolt and the spring. And then from here, we can remove our pressure plate. A lot of times, these clutch plates are going to want to come with it, so just be aware of that. So you can see the pressure plate was kind of hard to pull off, and that's because this adjuster for the push rod, it's got an O-ring on it. So just be aware of that. But as you take things apart, you can inspect them. So if you see any bluing or signs of discoloration on your metal parts, then you know this thing has gotten really hot, and you're gonna have to look into replacing anything that is discolored. Or if you see deep grooves in this pressure plate, get it replaced. This one's looking good, the O-ring's looking good. So we're gonna move on to the plates. So with these, there's a couple things you're gonna be looking at. If these are really bad, you can see that the friction material is burned, which these ones actually look pretty good. The other thing you wanna look at is the tabs. So if you see one side where the tab's kind of been flattened off and it's gonna have really sharp edges, you can see signs of wear. Obviously, they need to be replaced. And if that has happened, you probably have grooves worn into the basket as well. So you're gonna wanna inspect that. But these are looking pretty good. We can also measure them for thickness. So I'm just gonna use digital calipers to measure the friction material. And standard is 2.9 to 3.1 millimeters. 2.8 is the minimum spec. So if you're down to that, you definitely want to get your friction discs replaced. But again, these ones actually don't look that bad. Now for the steel plates, the most common thing I'm looking for on these is any signs of discoloration or bluing. If that's the case, it's almost guaranteed that these are going to be warped, and they can make your clutch drag, and it's just not going to work like it should. But these are looking pretty good. So I'll go ahead and inspect the rest of the stack in the same way. And again, if you find anything out of spec, you're going to want to get it replaced. And one more note, as I remove these, I'm setting them down in the same order that I take them off. Also take a look at your basket and hub. If you see grooves on the fingers or splines, get them replaced. Last thing we're going to do is measure the spring free length. You want to make sure you're above 35.3 millimeters, which ours are looking fine, but we're going to upgrade to the heavy duty springs. They're going to give us a little more clamping force. So right here you can see we've got a gear and the basket, these are attached together. And if I rock the basket back and forth and it moves a little bit more than the gear in each direction, then you've got some dampers in the back that are worn out. But this one's looking good, so we can go ahead and clean up our parts and get everything assembled. Now to get all this cleaned up, you can see we have gasket material behind. So before I spray, I do want to take this rag. I'm going to cover up as much as I can with it just so I don't get gasket material down in all my gears. We're going to scrape this off. We got lucky, we didn't have a ton of material left behind on here. I'm going to wipe down the sealing surface as well for the gasket. Now over at the bench, we still need to clean a few things up, but first thing I'm going to do over here is soak these new plates in some oil. So I'm going to lay them out. And if you don't want to use a whole bottle of oil to cover these up, you can set something on one side of the drain pan to get these tipped up. You just want to make sure these are fully saturated for when you go back together. So with these soaked, I'm going to set them aside. Now for the clutch covered gasket, we got lucky. This came off all in one piece. So I'm just going to start in one section and try to peel this off. And again, I'll try to keep it in one piece as much as I can. And then any remaining material, we're just going to use our gasket scraper to remove it and get the rest of that off. Okay, now for the clutch pack, I'm going to separate these frictions from the steels. Then we can go ahead and spray these parts off. So we got the steel plates sprayed off. We're not reusing the springs. Spray off these bolts if there's any material, dowel pins. And then last, we need to clean up this cover. And just so you guys know, we have that oil filter we just put in right there. So if it's real dirty by there, maybe you need to take it back out or just avoid spraying in that area. Now, before I start going back together, there's one thing I just want to double check. So I've got a magnetic tip screwdriver. I'm going to put this in here and it should pull out a little steel ball. You just want to verify that if your bike was tipped over a little to the side, that did not fall out. And if this is there, that tells me the push rod behind it is there as well. So just put a little engine oil on it and put it back in. Now from here, we're going to start with these friction discs. I'm going to put one in, and then we're going to stack the steels and we're going to alternate. Now with these steel plates, there's a sharp side if you feel the corner and a round or softer edge on one side. Doesn't matter which side goes in or out, you just want to make sure all the plates are installed the same. So I'm going to go ahead and slide this on. I've got my sharp edge facing out. Then we're just going to continue that stack the same way until they're all on. Now on the pressure plate for the push rod adjuster, we have that O-ring. This is where you want to apply just a little bit of grease. Now we're going to line up these holes with the posts on the hub. Slide the pressure plate on. Then we're going to set the springs on. We'll start the bolts, and again, we're going to tighten them in a crisscross pattern, and we're going to do that in a couple of steps. We're just getting these bolts started with the impact driver and most of the way to bottomed out. You always want to finish it off by hand so you don't damage anything. We're going to go ahead and tighten everything down to 4.2 foot-pounds. Now this next part is kind of hard to see, but we're going to adjust our clutch. You want to do that while you're in here. So what we're going to do is look at the clutch arm that's going into the crankcase. You can see it comes to a point at the end. That point, when you hold this forward with your finger, is supposed to line up with the ridge in the crankcase. And if it doesn't, that's when you want to use that adjuster on the outside of the pressure plate. So we're going to go ahead and loosen ours up and show you how to do this. So you can see as I turn that screw, it changes where that actuating arm is. So again, we want to line it up right with that ridge in the case. That's looking really good right there. So we can go ahead and tighten down the jam nut. And when you tighten that down, you don't have to go crazy. It's just under 6 foot-pounds is the tightening torque. And I also used the gear jammer to loosen and tighten it just so the clutch didn't move. Now for the dowel pins, we removed these from that clutch cover. I'm going to put these in the case. And we can install the new clutch cover gasket. After that, we have the clutch cover. Just make sure you line this up with your dowel pins, and also make sure that you don't pinch this wire coming down. So that's all the way on right there. I'm gonna start with one bolt with this wire retainer on it, just so we don't forget it or forget where it goes. I'm just going to get that started. We're leaving all the bolts loose for now. So you can see we have a few different sizes of bolts. So as we put these in, I'm just going to show you how to figure out where they go. So you can see that's the shortest bolt. That thing's sticking out more than 1/4 of an inch. So we know that should be the right spot for it. So over on this other side, this is where the other long bolt goes. Then you're going to have some medium-sized bolts. One's going to be right there. Then you have the 2 medium-sized bolts in these 2 locations. And then you have 4 remaining bolts. Again, they should stick out just a little more than 1/4 inch. We'll get those started by hand, and then we're going to tighten these in a crisscross pattern. And then in this upper corner, we have that oil filter cover bolt. And with all the bolts in place, we'll tighten and torque these to spec in a crisscross pattern. Now with the cover on, we can move on to the brake pedal. So I'm gonna clean up and grease that pivot right here. Go ahead and slide the pedal on. You're gonna have to push it far enough forward to clear this stop right there. And then for the foot peg mounting bolts, I'm applying a little Loctite. Now for the drain plug, we still need to put that in, so I'm wiping the sealing surface. We've got the screen, the spring goes on it, that's gonna go in there. Then we have the cap. We've got a little bit of oil on that O-ring. Thread that in and tighten it down. Wipe that area off, and then we can go ahead and reinstall that skid plate while we're down here. And with everything else buttoned up, we can go ahead and fill the bike with 1100 milliliters of oil. And before I forget, I need to install this brake light rod. So we're gonna start by connecting that at the top, and then we'll go ahead and connect that at the bottom. From here, we can reconnect our battery, install the seat, run the bike for a minute, and then check the oil. So that's it for replacing the clutch on your Yamaha TW200. If you have any questions, leave those down in the comments below. If you need any parts like those clutch plates, the springs, or the gaskets, you can find that stuff on our website. Just click the link in the description below. We offer free shipping on orders over $75. So take advantage of that and subscribe to our channel for more helpful content. I'm Charles with Rocky Mountain ATV MC. Thanks for watching.